Revit has a tool called the Parts tool, which allows us to break up certain Revit families, such as floors and walls, into their component parts. In this instance, there's a wall and it's made up of brick. What I'd like to do is I'd like to remove this exterior layer of brick to expose the CMU block wall that's behind it. We'll also see when we do this that there's a gypsum wallboard finished material for the interior side of the wall, but we'll leave that. We're going to take a look here underneath the project browser, and we can see that this view is currently 3D existing, which means it's a 3D view in the existing phase of time. Begin by selecting on the wall, and then underneath Modify on Walls on the ribbon, select on Create Parts. By doing this, and then clicking out into space, what you'll find is that this wall now has multiple layers of materials showing up for it. The reason why these display is that underneath the Properties bar, there's an option here that says Parts Visibility, and it says Show Parts. Because it says Show Parts, we can see each individual part that makes up the wall. If we change this to be Show Original, then we'll just see the way that it looked originally. And in this case, that's what I like to do. I just like to leave it the way that it looked originally inside of the original existing view. Now I'd like to go to the 3D demo view. From here, we can once again see each layer of material. Inside of this view, it still says Show Parts. Now, what I'd like to do is highlight and then select on this layer of material. Move your mouse over to this layer of material. Hold the Control key down on your keyboard, and then left click on that. And then go to the next layer of material. Continue to hold the Control key down on the keyboard, and then click the next layer of material, so that all we have left is the CMU block wall as well as the interior finish material. Now, from here, if we look at the properties, we're going to see a few different checkboxes that we could use. One is Excluded. If we clicked on Excluded, it would remove this layer of material. The only problem is, though, it wouldn't show up as being demolished. It would just show up as being gone if we selected on Excluded. So if I would select on Excluded, click off of it, you notice how this is now gone. Those layer materials no longer show up there. If you highlight over them, you can still see where they were. But for the most part, those layer materials are now gone. I don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on that layer material and then hold down the Control key, click here, and then click on the last layer material in order to highlight all of those. And now I'm going to click the check mark next to Excluded again to bring them back. There's also an option that says Material by Original. What this means is that it'll keep that material of whatever the original material was. If you clear the checkbox out, you can then specify a different material. In this case, it's trying to do all three. More than likely, you'd only do one at a time. I'll put a check mark back in there because I don't really care much about the material. But the thing that I do care about, though, is going to be the phasing properties down at the very bottom of the properties list. Here it says Phased Demolished. So we want to change the phase at which this gets demolished. So we're going to clear the checkbox there, and I'd like to change that to be Demo. And we can already see it's starting to show itself as being dashed lines. And if we click off of it, we can see it's slightly half-toned, if you will. And then it has these dashed lines going around the outside of it. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is to go into the 3D New Construction view underneath the project browser. We can now see all we have left is the CMU block wall, as well as any materials that were making up that interior finish. So by creating these individual parts out of the wall, and we did this by selecting on the wall, coming up here to what's now grayed out because the parts have already been made, but we selected on the Create Parts tool. We were then able to subdivide each of these parts out, select on each layer material that makes this wall up. From there, we went to Properties, and I'll go ahead and select back on that part again, make sure that it's highlighted. And from here, we could either change these material properties to be something else. We could change the phase it was created or the phase it was demolished in so that the wall would look like it was getting built up or getting demolished appropriately. In general, we can make modifications to each of these individual layers of materials that make up this entire wall assembly.